Marcus woke to sunlight filtering through his blinds. Today was the day the judge would announce the decision. He felt a mix of nerves and calm nerves because so much hung on this moment. Calm because he had done everything he could. He dressed in his uniform again, the badge polished bright. He thought of the morning ceremony he once led with new recruits, reminding them that their badge represented honor and service. His badge also symbolized his fight for fairness. He drove to the courthouse, each turn bringing back memories of the hearing. He parked and walked inside, the marble floors cool under his shoes. He saw familiar faces in the gallery. Maria Williams, his attorney. Pastor Johnson from Elmwood. His sister, her husband, and their children. Neighbors who had come for support. Marcus felt strength in their presence, proof that his choice to speak up had not gone unnoticed. The judge entered, and everyone stood. Marcus rose, straightened his shoulders, and offered a small nod. The judge took his seat and began. He spoke slowly, clearly, after reviewing the evidence, testimonies, and legal arguments. I find that the stop of Officer Marcus Hayes on the night of August 14th was conducted without reasonable suspicion and was motivated in part by racial bias. The City of Metro and officers Brian Reeves and Kyle Barnes are hereby ordered to pay damages in the amount of $200,000 to Officer Hayes. Additionally, the Metro Police Department shall revise its traffic stop policies, implement regular training on implicit bias, and establish a civilian review board for oversight. This court is adjourned. A hush fell over the courtroom. Then, softly, applause began first from the gallery, then spreading like wildfire. Marcus felt his heart swell. He had won. He had not only won for himself, but for everyone who might face similar injustice. He closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing each clap and cheer. Outside, reporters asked questions. Officer Hayes, what does this ruling mean to you? Marcus spoke into the microphone. This ruling shows that fairness matters, that no one is above the law, and that speaking out can bring change. I hope this leads to real improvements in how police treat all people. Cameras flashed, and he felt a surge of hope that his case would inspire others. At the courthouse steps, his supporters cheered. Pastor Johnson clasped his hand. You did it, Marcus, he said warmly. His sister hugged him, tears in her eyes. I'm so proud of you. Neighbors held signs reading, "Change begins here," and "Equal justice." Marcus looked at each face and knew this moment was bigger than any single person. Over the next weeks, news reports covered the settlement and the department's promised reforms. The chief of police issued a public apology, standing before the press flanked by community leaders. We failed to uphold our own standards, the chief said. We are committed to doing better. Footage showed officers attending bias training, discussing scenarios, and learning from each other. A new civilian review board was formed, with representatives from different neighborhoods. Marcus was invited to speak at its first meeting, where he sat alongside elected officials and activists. Back at the station, Akuza's colleagues greeted him differently. Some offered handshakes and words of support. A few older officers admitted they had questioned his decision, but now saw its value. New recruits looked at him with respect, some telling him, "You showed me what integrity looks like." The locker room felt lighter, as if a heavy weight had lifted. Marcus still did his duty answering calls, patrolling his beat, helping people, but now his work carried the extra honor of having sparked real change. He returned to community outreach with renewed passion. At the Elmwood Youth Center, children asked about the case. He told them in simple words, "When something seems unfair, you have a choice. Accept it or speak up." I spoke up, and look what happened. The children listened wide-eyed, then broke into applause. Their excitement reminded him why he began this journey, to protect and inspire those who would follow. One afternoon, he received a letter from a young officer in another city who had read about his case. The officer wrote, "Your story gave me courage to speak out against unfair stops in my department." Marcus felt a warm glow of pride. The ripple effect of his stand reached farther than he imagined. As months passed, Marcus settled back into his routines. He brewed strong coffee each morning and jogged through the park before dawn. He continued yoga classes to ease the tension of the job. He maintained family dinners on Sundays. Yet under each ordinary moment, he carried the knowledge that he had made a difference. On the anniversary of the incident, he stood at the same corner where the unmarked sedan had pulled up. He touched the hood of his cruiser, parked there now, and remembered his fear and shock. But more than that, he recalled his resolve and the justice that followed. He thought of others who might face that street someday. He hoped they would see his cruiser and know it symbolized something. Mara promised that the system could correct itself. Back home. He gathered photographs from the past year, a picture of the courtroom smiling faces, a snapshot of officers. In bias training, a group photo from the youth center. He laid them out on the table and pinned them on a corkboard by his desk. Looking at them, he felt a sense of completion, yet also a sense of continuation. The story did not end with a settlement. It grew into new chapters of community building and fair policing. That evening, he joined a neighborhood meeting at the community hall. Residents discussed concerns and ideas for making their streets safer. Marcus listened, took notes, and offered suggestions. He could see how the lawsuit had shifted relationships. People spoke openly, trusting he would listen and act. He realized true change meant more than court orders. It meant ongoing engagement and trust-building. Later, he walked home under a sky painted with stars. He paused on the sidewalk, feeling the gentle night breeze. He thought of his journey from a young boy who admired police cars to an officer who defended his own rights and changed the system. He remembered the academy drills, the community games, the long hours writing reports, the painful stop, the tense hearings, and finally the victory and reforms. He reached his front door and paused. He felt gratitude for his family, his attorney, his supporters, and even for the two officers who had sparked this fight. Without their actions, he might never have stood up and shown that change was possible. He stepped inside his home, feeling a deep peace. Before going to bed, Marcus sat by his bedside table and placed a small wooden box on it. Inside were the dashcam drive, a tiny gavel charm, and a folded letter from the judge commending his courage. He closed his eyes and whispered to himself, "Thank you for guiding me. May I continue to serve with honor." He drifted to sleep, knowing that his uniform meant more now, just the authority to act, but the responsibility to ensure that authority was used fairly. His dreams that night were calm, filled with faces of children smiling, neighborhoods at peace, and officers working together without fear. And in his heart, he carried a quiet promise to remain vigilant, to continue speaking up, and to inspire others to believe in justice, no matter the cost. Marcus woke before sunrise, as he did most mornings. The sky was still dark, but he loved the quiet hours before the world stirred. Today was different. It was the first day of the courtroom hearing. He slipped on his suit, the crisp white shirt and navy tie feeling heavy with meaning. He had not worn a suit in years, except for weddings and funerals. Now he wore it for justice. He left his townhouse and drove to the courthouse. The streets still bore the last glow of streetlights, and a few early joggers passed him by. Marcus parked and checked his reflection in the car window. His posture was straight, his face calm, though inside his heart beat fast. He wanted to feel fear, but instead he felt resolve. He reminded himself of why he did this, to challenge unfair treatment, to show that bias had no place in law enforcement. Inside the grand building, marble floors gleamed under chandeliers. Marcus paused at the metal detector and placed his belongings in a tray. He watched the screen as the guard waved him through. He walked down a hallway lined with wooden panels and stepped into the courtroom. The air inside felt cool and solemn. Rows of benches stood empty for now, and the judge's bench rose high at the front. A flag stood in one corner. The weight of the space settled on him like a quiet promise. His attorney, Maria Williams, waved from a table near the front. She gave him a small nod and a reassuring smile. On the other side sat the city's attorney and two officers, Officer Brian Reeves and Officer Kyle Barnes. They looked at him with polite reserve. Marcus took a seat, placed his folder of documents beside him, and closed his eyes for a breath. He thought of his mother, his family, his community. He thought of every time he had walked his beat, of every child he had helped, of every life he had saved. He knew he belonged here. The judge entered, robes flowing, and everyone stood. Marcus rose and met the judge's calm gaze. The judge gestured, and everyone sat. The judge called the case. Marcus watched as Reeves took the stand first. The city. Attorney asked simple questions. Did you see Officer Hayes drive erratically? Reeves hesitated. He scanned his notes, then spoke in a measured tone. I believe the vehicle matched a description from dispatch. It seemed suspicious. The attorney pressed. What description? There was no suspect match. Officer Hayes was in uniform. Reeves shifted, glanced at Barnes, then mumbled, "It." Just looked off. Marcus felt a tight knot in his chest. He had trained Reeves. He remembered showing him how to read a license plate, how to recognize a routine traffic stop. He wondered if Reeves felt guilt now. The attorney thanked Reeves and called Barnes next. Barnes looked uncomfortable. He answered questions about policy and procedure. When asked why he had not apologized to Marcus, Barnes stared at the floor. Lawyer whispered in his ear. Then Barnes said softly, "I'm sorry for how I handled it." Marcus felt a small relief. Barnes's apology was not enough, but it showed a crack in their defense. The city attorney rested, and it was Marcus's turn. Maria turned to him. "Officer Hayes, please stand and raise your right hand." He did so, and her voice guided him through the oath. She began with background. "You have served as a Metro police officer for 10 years?" He nodded. She asked about his training, his community work, his daily duties. He spoke with quiet pride, describing mentorship, crime prevention, the bonds he built with neighbors. Then she moved to the night of the stop. "Describe what happened." Marcus's voice held a calm clarity as he recounted each moment. The soft jazz on the radio, the unmarked sedan flashing blue lights, the officers demanding his papers. He spoke of the confusion when a marked cruiser in uniform didn't protect him. He spoke of the officer's tone, how Reeves's eyes narrowed, how Barnes's grip tightened on his badge. He described the fear, not for himself alone, but for anyone who might face similar bias. The judge listened without interrupting. Maria asked him how he felt. Marcus paused. "I felt betrayed," he said. "I felt shame. I wanted people to respect the badge, not doubt it." His voice cracked briefly, but he held on. He thought of his mother's warning, of the weight of his uniform, of the oath he swore to serve all people equally. He felt the truth of his words strengthen him. Cross-examination came next. The city attorney probed. "Officer Hayes, isn't it true that you could have avoided this by pulling into a police lot instead of the street?" Marcus met the attorney's eyes. "I did not think the officers would mistake me for a suspect. I was on duty in a marked cruiser. I had no reason to change course," the attorney continued, pushing on minor details. But Marcus stayed focused, answering honestly and directly. He knew the purpose of cross-examination was to sow doubt, but he trusted the facts. After hours of testimony and legal arguments, the judge announced a recess. Marcus felt relief flood through him like sunlight. In the hallway, Maria placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did great," she said softly. He nodded, trying to collect himself. He saw community supporters in the gallery. Pastor Johnson, his sister and niece, a few neighbors who had come to show solidarity. They offered thumbs up and gentle smiles. Their presence grounded him, reminding him he was not alone. When the hearing resumed, both sides presented policy experts. The retired chief testified that the stop violated department guidelines unless there was probable cause. He spoke of implicit bias and how it could influence split-second decisions. He noted that stopping a uniformed officer in a marked cruiser without cause showed flawed judgment. The city's expert countered that officers sometimes make mistakes. Under stress, the debate continued, weaving legal language with human experience. Finally, after more testimony, the judge called for closing statements. The city attorney spoke first, arguing that the officers acted in good faith, that no racial bias could be proven beyond doubt. Maria stood next. She spoke with heartfelt conviction. This case is about trust. Officer Hayes trusted his colleagues, trusted the system. He served faithfully, and yet he was stopped because of the color of his skin. The dashcam footage, the officer's own words, the expert testimony, together they tell a clear story of profiling. We asked the court to hold these officers and the department accountable. The judge listened, then dismissed everyone until the next hearing date, when he would deliver his decision. The gavel fell, and the gallery emptied. Marcus felt his legs tremble, but also felt a thrill of hope. He had spoken his truth. He had stood up for fairness. Outside, reporters crowded the entrance. A local news camera rolled. Marcus and Maria stepped outside first. A reporter asked, "Officer Hayes, how do you feel about today's hearing?" Marcus paused, then spoke calmly into the microphone. "I feel that justice is possible when we speak up. I hope my case leads to change so that no one else feels unsafe in their own uniform." The reporter thanked him, and cameras clicked. On the steps, community members waited. Pastor Johnson hugged him. His sister and niece smiled proudly. Neighbors held signs reading "Justice for Marcus" and "End Racial Profiling." Marcus felt warmth in his chest. He had worried about backlash, but instead he found support and gratitude. That evening, back at home, Marcus sat in his living room with his family. His mother made her special chicken soup, and they ate together at the small wooden table. His father shared a story from his postal days about standing up for fairness. His sister and niece chatted about school projects and cartoons. For a moment, Marcus let himself enjoy simple family joys. He felt his tension ease. But he also knew the case was not over. The judge's decision lay ahead, and the department might appeal. Yet Marcus felt ready for whatever came next. He had taken a stand, and he believed in the power of truth. He reminded himself that change often started with one person's courage to speak out. Before bed, he walked to his window and looked out at the quiet street. The oak trees stood tall under a sky full of stars. He touched the window's cool glass, thinking of the cruiser he drove, the courtrooms, the filing cabinets full of evidence. He knew his path would continue along these streets, balancing his duties as an officer and his role as a seeker of justice. He whispered a silent promise. No matter the outcome, he would keep serving, keep mentoring, and keep speaking for fairness. His uniform would remain a symbol not only of authority, but of integrity and hope. With that promise, he turned away and went to sleep, ready for the final chapter of his fight for justice. Marcus woke early the next morning, sunlight spilling through his bedroom window. He felt a quiet tension in his chest, like a knot tightening. He dressed slowly in a crisp shirt and slacks, taking care with each button. His badge and uniform remained stored in his closet. Today, he would meet his attorney again and move forward with the complaint. He reminded himself, this was more than a personal fight. It was about fairness and respect. He drove to a small law office downtown. The streets were busy with morning. Traffic delivery trucks unloading packages, office workers hurrying along sidewalks, and bicyclists weaving between cars. Marcus parked his personal vehicle in a metered spot and walked inside the office building. The smell of coffee and fresh paint greeted him, climbed the narrow stairs to the second floor, and stopped before a dark wooden door labeled Williams and Carter, attorneys at law. He took a steady breath and knocked lightly. Inside, he heard a friendly voice. "Come in." He opened the door and found his attorney, Maria Williams, sitting at a desk covered with papers. She was a tall woman with kind eyes and a calm presence. She stood and offered a firm handshake. "Good morning, Marcus. Ready to take the next step?" He nodded and sat in the chair opposite her desk. Maria turned on a small desk lamp and reviewed her notes. "I've drafted the complaint," she said, sliding a document toward him. "It alleges racial profiling and violation of your civil rights under state and federal law. We'll name the 2 officers and the department." Marcus read the first few paragraphs. The language felt formal but precise. It described how he was in uniform, on duty, driving a marked cruiser, and still was stopped without cause. It detailed the officers' questions and their behavior. It set the stage for a lawsuit. As he read, he felt a mix of pride and anxiety. pride that he was standing up, anxiety at the thought of going to court. He looked up at Maria. "Is this strong enough?" She smiled gently. "Very strong. We have your dashcam footage and your detailed notes. We also have witness statements. From people who saw the sedan behind you, the department will have to respond. They may offer a settlement, or they may fight it. Either way, we'll press forward." Marcus exhaled. He felt a small wave of relief. "What do I need to do now?" "Sign here," Maria said, pointing to the bottom of the document. And here, he signed both pages with a steady hand. "We'll file this today. Then the department will have 30 days to answer. We'll prepare for depositions, gather more evidence, and consider whether to bring in expert witnesses on police procedures and bias." He signed the final page. Maria gathered the papers and slipped them into a leather folder. "I know this is stressful," she said kindly. "You're doing the right thing. I've handled cases like this before. When an officer speaks out, it sends a message, helps change policies." Marcus nodded, feeling determined. "Thank you, Maria. I trust you." They shook hands again. He walked out of the office feeling serious but hopeful. The city felt different now, as though he carried a new purpose. He thought of Elmwood, the neighborhood he loved, and the children he mentored. If speaking out could help ensure they grow up in a fair system, then every difficult moment would be worth it. He returned to his cruiser to head back to the station. He passed familiar streets' corner stores, the church with the white steeple, the playground where he had coached youth soccer. He wondered if people would stare if they knew he was suing his own department. He worried about whispers among colleagues. He told himself to stay strong and focus on the goal. At the station, he reported to Lieutenant Rogers. Rogers took the leather folder and raised an eyebrow. "So you filed?" "What?" "Yes, Lieutenant," Marcus said. "I felt it was necessary." Rogers closed the folder slowly. "I respect your courage, Marcus. But be aware that some may question your loyalty." "Oh, God." Marcus met his gaze. "I'm loyal to the law, to the community, and to my oath. I cannot remain silent when this happens." Rogers nodded. "Understood. We'll support you as best we can, but know that internal politics can be tricky. If you need anything, time, resources, let me know." He paused, then offered a small smile. "Stay safe." Marcus returned the smile. "Thank you." In the following days, word spread quietly through the department. Some fellow officers offered private support, stopping to say, "Good for you," or "I had a similar thing happen." To me, others avoided him, their eyes flicking away when he entered the briefing room. A few whispered in corners. He overheard a sergeant mention making waves and rocking the boat. It stung, but he focused on his work. He answered calls, helped investigate reports, and remained professional at every turn. Outside the station, community leaders learned of his lawsuit. Pastor Johnson of Elmwood Baptist Church called him to express support. "Marcus, you've always been a friend," the pastor said in a phone call. "What happened to you is wrong. We'll stand with you." The local NAACP chapter invited him to a meeting where he was thanked by neighbors and former mentees. Their words lifted him, reminding him why he had chosen this path. His family also rallied around him. His mother cooked his favorite meals, baked chicken, steamed vegetables, rice. His sister visited, bringing pictures of her children and telling him about their school projects. His father, retired from the Postal Service, offered quiet advice on perseverance. He reminded him to rest, to take time for himself, and to remember that family love was a source of strength. Amid the whirlwind, Marcus found solace in small routines. He continued his morning runs in the park, breathing the early air as the sun rose. He attended a weekly yoga class to ease his tense muscles and clear his mind. He met a friend for coffee. On Saturdays, sitting in a corner booth as they talked about sports, movies, and life. For a few hours, he could laugh and relax, forgetting the lawsuit and the stress. At the same time, legal preparations continued. Maria Williams sent notices for depositions. Marcus met with her and her team to review questions he might face. They practiced in her office, she asking questions in a calm, measured tone. "Why did you choose to sue?" she would ask. He practiced answering clearly, because I was stopped without cause, in uniform, and I believe it was because of my race. He rehearsed telling his story with honesty and emotion, emphasizing his service record and his commitment to justice. He also worked with an expert witnesser, retired chief from another city who reviewed the dashcam footage and the officer's conduct. The expert wrote an impartial report noting that the stop violated department policy and that implicit bias could explain the officer's actions. This report bolstered Marcus's case, giving the complaint a strong factual foundation. One afternoon, he sat in a deposition room at the courthouse. Maria was by his side. Across the table sat the department's attorney, a stiff man in a gray suit. Marcus took a deep breath as the attorney began. "Officer Hayes, please state your full name for the record." He answered calmly. The questions moved from basic details to more pointed ones. Did you feel intimidated by the officers? Why didn't you leave immediately? Isn't it part of your job to comply? Marcus kept his composure. He answered truthfully and directly, explaining how he felt confusion and hurt. He described the bias he believed was at play. At times, his voice shook, but he maintained eye contact, knowing that honesty was his best defense. After the deposition, Marcus felt drained but resolute. Maria patted his shoulder. "You did well," she said. "Or one step closer." He nodded. "Thank you." Outside the courthouse, he paused in the warm afternoon sun. He watched people crossing the street, children walking home from school. He thought of the moment when the sedan first pulled up behind him, the shock, the anger, the betrayal. He thought of every small act of kindness he had done as an officer, helping a lost child find their mother, delivering a safety talk at a school, comforting someone who had lost a loved one. He believed those acts mattered. And he believed that, by standing up now, he could help make the system better for everyone. That evening, back at home, Marcus brewed tea and sat by his window. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple. He let himself rest in the quiet. Tomorrow, he would return to work, continue the fight in court, and keep serving his community. He closed his eyes and whispered a silent promise, no matter how the lawsuit ended. He would never lose faith in justice or in the power of one person to make a difference. And with that promise, he allowed himself to drift into a deep, peaceful sleep. Marcus sat in the driver's seat of his cruiser, the engine's purr a familiar comfort after a long shift. The dashboard lights glowed softly, and the radio played a gentle jazz tune. He had just finished taking statements from a witness too, a hit and run 2 miles back. He felt satisfied that he had done solid work tonight. The street was quiet, lined with tall oaks whose leaves whispered in the warm summer breeze. A single lamppost glowed at each corner, casting patches of light on the pavement. Everything felt as it should, calm, orderly, predictable. As he turned onto Cedar Avenue, a white sedan without any markings eased in behind him. He imagined a colleague tagging along for backup after his long investigation. But the sedan's driver flashed blue lights, not the softer amber ones used by civilian vehicles. Startled, Marcus reached up and flicked his overhead lights on, matching the sedan's signal. He guided his cruiser to the side of the street, heart pounding briefly, but settling as he prepared to speak with fellow officers. He rolled down his window. The air smelled of fresh mulch from nearby flower beds and the faint temps of summer rain. Marcus switched off his radio, giving his full attention to the officers behind him. The sedan's engine idled, and 2 men in plain clothes stepped out. Both wore badges clipped to their belts and holstered sidearms. One appeared to be in his early 20s, tall with a lean build and a tight jaw. The other was a bit older, stockier with a neatly trimmed mustache and kind eyes that still carried a hint of caution. Marcus kept his hands in plain sight, resting them lightly on the steering wheel. He cleared his throat. "Good evening. How can I help you, officers?" The taller officer stepped forward quickly. His voice sounded rushed, almost nervous. "License and registration. Also badge number and unit." Marcus felt confusion mixed with concern. He reached into his left pocket, pulling out his wallet and badge holder. He handed over his driver's license first, then his registration card. Finally, he unclipped his metal badge from his uniform, sliding it through the window. It felt strange to part with his symbol of authority for a moment. But it was standard procedure when another officer requested to see it. The officers examined each document closely. The younger man flipped the pages of the registration, his eyes darting back and forth. Ah! The older one, the stockier man, turned the badge over in his hand, as though inspecting its authenticity. Marcus tapped his fingers on the steering wheel. Trying to keep calm, he forced a polite tone. Is there a problem? I wasn't speeding, and I'm on duty. The younger officer looked up, his eyes narrowing. You were driving erratically, swerving between lanes. He pointed at the windshield, as though every tiny scratch could prove his claim. Marcus blinked. He recalled the smooth ride down this street moments ago, spoke evenly. Officer, I've been on patrol for the past hour. I've handled a hit and run, he said, his voice firm but respectful. I did not swerve. My lights were on, and my siren was off. I didn't hear a single complaint over the radio. The two officers exchanged a quick glance. The taller one folded his arms. Maybe you didn't notice, but you looked suspicious. We had a call about a vehicle matching your description in the area. Marcus's heart sank. Suspicious how? My cruiser is marked. My uniform is visible through the windshield. The officers were silent. The streetlight above flickered. For a moment, only the whir of distant traffic and the rustle of leaves could be heard. Marcus tried again. I've been with this department for 10 years. My name is Officer Marcus Hayes. Badge number 4472, Unit 52. You can confirm with dispatch. The younger officer glanced at the radio clip to his belt. He tapped it twice. Dispatch. Confirm identity of Officer Hayes. Badge 4472. He paused, listening. Then he looked back at Marcus, his expression unreadable. Dispatch says, You're legitimate. Marcus exhaled slowly, relief mixed with anger. He returned his badge and license, sliding them back into his pocket and vehicle files. He touched the radio on his dashboard and clicked it on. Unit 522 dispatch. Resume normal operations. He placed the radio back, his hands trembling ever so slightly. The stockier officer folded his arms and stared at the dark street. Then he shrugged. All right, you're free to go. Be more careful out there. Marcus stared. Be careful. I'm the one in uniform, in a marked car, on duty. What message am I supposed to take from this? The officers didn't answer. The taller one climbed back into the sedan, and the stockier man followed. The sedan's engines surged and pulled away silently. Marcus watched the taillights disappear around the corner. He turned off his overhead lights, but he didn't move right away. His mind replayed the encounter, the chilly stare, the false accusation, the utter lack of apology. He sat for a long moment in silence. The radio crackled softly with background noise, but he left it off. He rested his head against the seat's headrest and closed his eyes. He thought about how he had devoted his life to serving and protecting. He remembered the first time he put on his uniform. He remembered his mother's proud smile at graduation. He remembered the trust he had built with families in Elmwood. He had believed being an officer meant people on both sides of the badge would treat him fairly. He shook his head slowly. He turned the key in the ignition. Engine rumbled and he backed off the curb. His pulse slowly returned to normal, but the warmth he had felt earlier drained away. Every red light felt longer than usual. Every pedestrian crossing felt heavy with judgment. As he drove the last few blocks to the station, Marcus's thoughts tumbled. He wondered if he had done something wrong. He replayed his driving. Could he have drifted? He thought of the street lights, of the oak trees. Everything seemed the same as always. He thought of his cruiser, its body gleaming under the street lamps, the word police bright on the door. How had they not recognized him? He parked in his usual spot behind the station. The building was quiet at this hour. Few cars sat under the overhang, and the front lights glowed softly. Marcus climbed out of the cruiser, closed the door firmly, and took a deep breath of cool air. His uniform felt heavier now, as if weighted by unseen hands. He straightened his badge and strode toward the entrance, each step echoing in the empty lot. Inside, the lobby was lit by fluorescent panels. The reception desk was unattended. He walked past the photos of past chiefs and rookie classes, passed by the bulletin board with flyers for community events, and headed to the locker room. He needed privacy to sort through his emotions. He closed the locker room door behind him, the click sounding too loud in the quiet space. He hung his uniform on the hook and leaned against the locker. He closed his eyes. He thought of the two officers. One had been someone he had trained. The other was a transfer who knew nothing of his work. Their behavior felt like a betrayal on two levels, professional and personal. He thought of his mother's words, "Not every officer will treat you the same." He had never believed her fully until now. He took out his phone and opened the camera app. He rewound the dashcam footage from his cruiser, watching the interaction play out on the small screen. He saw the taller officer's finger point aggressively, saw the stockier officer's eyes shift suspiciously. He paused on the frame where his badge lay in the other officer's hand. He felt a twist in his chest. He knew he needed to document everything. He saved the video to 2 separate locations on his phone, emailed one copy to his attorney, and stored another on a secure cloud account he used for personal records. He typed notes in his phone's memo app: date, time, location, officer names if possible, what was said, how he felt. He double-checked that every detail was accurate. After 15 minutes, he exhaled and zipped up his uniform bag. He changed into plain clothes, folding his uniform neatly. He tucked in the shirt, smoothed out the creases, and placed it carefully in his bag. He paused, touched the badge pinned inside the bag, and closed his eyes. He was tired in a way that went deeper than physical exhaustion. He felt the weight of being judged by the very people he worked alongside. Yet beneath the hurt and anger, a spark of resolve glowed. He had a duty to himself, to his community, and to the principles he had sworn to uphold. He would not let this pass in silence. He walked out of the locker room and into the lobby. The station was still quiet, but now the walls felt different, as though they held unwelcome memories. He strode to the Internal Affairs office, prepared to speak up for himself and for the fairness he believed in. If the system was to work, it had to confront its own mistakes, and Marcus was ready to hold it to that promise. That night, as he slipped into his own bed at home, he couldn't sleep immediately. The streetlights outside cast long shadows through the blinds. He stared at the ceiling, thinking of the next steps. He would file a formal complaint, seek legal advice, and ensure his voice was heard. He knew the coming days would test him, that he might face criticism or doubt from colleagues. But he also knew that speaking out was the right choice. He would not just be a witness to this unfairness, he would be its challenger. And in that decision, he felt a quiet strength he would carry with him into whatever came next. Marcus Hayes grew up on the same streets he would one day patrol. As a boy, he admired the police cars that rolled through his neighborhood of Elmwood, thinking of the officers as quiet guardians who brought order. His mother often warned him that not every encounter with a police officer was kind, but Marcus believed he could make a difference. He learned early that respect was earned by listening, by showing up when people needed help, and by nurturing trust. Spent afternoons volunteering at a youth center, helping children with homework and organizing soccer games. He felt proud when the kids cheered his name and ran to give him high fives. That warmth taught him something vital. People respond when they see someone who cares. After graduation, Marcus joined the Metro Police Academy. The first weeks were tough. He woke before sunrise for drill practice, ran laps in heavy gear, and studied manuals filled with rules and laws. He learned how to speak to frightened people, how to calm angry crowds, and how to keep a shaky suspect from hurting themselves or others. He found comfort in the academy's routine and in the friendships he formed with classmates who shared his dream of serving the community. They laughed late into the night, shared stories from their lives, and dreamed of the day they would earn their badges. When graduation day came, Marcus felt a surge of pride unlike anything before. He wore his new uniform with careful precision. His family stood in the audience, his mother clutching a tissue, his father beaming, and his younger sister looking up at him as if he were a hero. In that moment, He promised himself he would protect and serve everyone, no matter who they were. His first assignment was back in Elmwood. His sergeant told him, "You know these streets better than anybody. Use your heart and your head." Marcus patrolled on foot, stopping to talk to shop owners, checking on elderly residents, and saying hello to the children playing in front yards. He learned each block's history, the names of local business owners, and the stories of families who had lived there for generations. He became a familiar face. People waved when they saw him. They trusted him more than any other officer because he understood their struggles. Over the years, Marcus rose through the ranks. He became a field training officer, guiding new recruits through their first on-the-job experiences. He taught them how to handle a tense traffic stop, how to read body language, and how to talk down a heated argument. He praised them when they did well, gently corrected them when they made mistakes, and shared his own missteps as lessons. His leadership won him respect within the department. Other officers saw that he worked late nights, read every report carefully, and showed concern for both victims and suspects. Marcus believed every person deserved fair treatment. At home, Marcus's life was simple but full. He lived in a small townhouse not far from the station. Each morning, he brewed coffee strong and black, the smell filling his kitchen. He ate oatmeal while reading the news on his phone. Sometimes he caught a glimpse of a story about police misconduct. He felt a stinging frustration that people didn't always see the good he and many others tried to do. But he reminded himself there was more work to be done, that every honest act of kindness pushed the world closer to justice. He dated casually, but his job often pulled him away at odd hours. He learned to appreciate quiet evenings alone, curling up with a good book, or cooking a simple pasta dinner. He stashed childhood photographs on his living room walls, snapshots of him in a Boy Scout uniform smiling at the camera, a picture of his mother's proud face at his academy graduation, and a photo of him hugging his sister on her wedding day. These images grounded him, reminding him of where he came from and why he chose this path. One evening in August, after a long shift investigating a string of car break-ins, Marcus stepped into his cruiser and turned on the siren for a quick drive home. His body ached from chasing suspects on foot and crawling under parked cars, too. Dust for Prince clicked on the radio, listening to smooth jazz as the city lights blurred past. He felt a mild satisfaction at the thought that his fingerprints might help catch someone and bring relief to a worried family. Everything felt normal. Just a few blocks from his townhouse, an unmarked white sedan pulled alongside him and activated. Flashing blue lights. Marcus's heart skipped. He flicked on his own overhead lights, rolled down his window, and reached for his registration and badge. The air felt thick with confusion. He watched the sedan ease to a stop behind him. Other officers stepped out, both young and in plain clothes, though badges dangled from their belts. One kept his hand near his holster, the other folded his arms, watching Marcus closely. Marcus raised his palms, showing he carried no weapon aside from his issued sidearm, in plain view. "Good evening, officers. May I ask why I'm being stopped?" The taller officer pointed at Marcus's uniform. "You weren't speeding, you weren't swerving. You're driving a marked cruiser. We need to confirm your identity, badge number, and your unit." Marcus obliged, handing over his license and badge. His pulse thumped in his ears. He recognized the other officer from the station officer Brian Reeves, a rookie he had trained. Months ago, Reeves's face was hard to read. The other man, Officer Kyle Barnes, was a transfer from a neighboring precinct. "Name?" Barnes asked, scanning the badge closely. "Badge number?" Marcus answered calmly. He noticed the slight hesitation in Reeves's voice, the way Barnes's eyes flicked past him to observe the neighborhood. They ran his information, radio crackling in the background. 10 minutes passed like hours. Marcus stayed polite, though. His chest tightened. He wondered what was happening, why he faced scrutiny when he wore the same blue uniform they did. Finally, Barnes handed back the documents without apology. "Officer Hayes, you're free to go." "Be more careful." Marcus blinked. "Excuse me?" "Be careful. I'm in uniform, on duty in a marked car." Barnes shrugged and got back into the sedan. Reeves slid in beside him. The sedan left without a word. leaving Marcus alone with a nagging ache of betrayal. He watched the blue lights disappear around the corner. He waited for several minutes before turning off his lights and driving the last block home. That night, Marcus lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. He felt anger rise, then fall into a deep hurt. He had devoted his life to serving this department, to safeguarding the community he loved, yet two of his own colleagues had treated him like a suspect. He thought of his mother and how she always warned him that the world might not see past the color of his skin. He knew the risks he took as a black man in law enforcement, but he never imagined a day like this. He felt the weight of his uniform suddenly too heavy. Early the next morning, Marcus reported the incident to Internal Affairs. He met with Lieutenant Rogers, a fair but cautious supervisor. Rogers listened, brows furrowed, as Marcus recounted each moment. He watched the dashcam footage together, how Barnes leaned in close, how Reeves's eyes narrowed. Rogers sighed. "This should not have happened, Marcus. I'll file the report. We'll look into it." Marcus nodded, but he felt uncertain. He sensed that the department would treat this quietly, protecting its own. He remembered the stories he'd heard, of officers who spoke up only to face silence or retaliation. He had seen fellow officers ostracized when they challenged misconduct, yet he believed in accountability. He believed the law applied to everyone, including those sworn to uphold it. He decided to keep working his beat, but also to gather evidence. He reached out to his attorney, someone he trusted from his community work. They discussed the possibility of filing a civil suit for racial profiling. It was a big step, one that could strain relationships at work and risk his career. But Marcus felt he had no choice. This was bigger than him. It was about ensuring that every person, regardless of skin color or rank, received fair treatment. Under the law, over the following days, Marcus balanced normal duties with quiet preparation. He attended community meetings, answered calls for help, and mentored new recruits. He smiled and crouched to speak with children, still caring deeply about their future. Yet inside he grappled with doubt and resolve. He recalled his earliest days in the youth center, telling kids that one person could spark change. Wondered if that change started with him. By the end of the week, Marcus had gathered everything he needed. The dashcam footage, witness statements, medical records, showing how the stress affected his health. He met with his attorney in a small office lined with law books. He pored over the evidence, talking strategy. Marcus spoke softly, but his voice carried firm belief. He pictured the young officers he once trained, hoping they would follow his example of integrity rather than the darker path of bias. He pictured the families in Elmwood who trusted him to be fair. He pictured children like him learning that justice was meant for all. As he walked out of the attorney's office, Marcus felt a quiet calm settle over him. He had chosen to stand for what was right, even if it meant facing uncertainty. He knew the road ahead would be long. There would be hearings, statements, and public attention. But he also knew he would carry the truth with him, that he had worn his uniform with honor, served his community with kindness, and would not let injustice go unanswered. In that moment, Marcus felt the same pride he felt on the day he graduated. From the academy, ready once more to servand, to seek the rue.